Damos and me, we are not just friends, we are brothers. We have the same story.
According to the law of return, anybody who has a Jewish grandparent is eligible to become a citizen of the State of Israel. Israel has agreed to bring this last group of 9,000, but it has not implemented the decision.
יש תקציב לעלות אלפי יהודים מאירופה, מאמריקה. ליהודים שחורים אין כסף. זו הגזענות.
We Ethiopian Jews are Jewish as a Jewish in the rest of the world. So why we cannot go to Israel?
This is a similar story for me, the story of longing to go home. That's my story too. We're going to bring Ethiopians and have them speak in their own voice. This really is their story and it needs to be told by them. It needs to be their faces, their authenticity.
የሆነ ነገር መለወጥ ማናመጣ ከሆነ ሰው ልክ እንደርግማት ነው የሚሄድ።
There is no option in Gondar in Ethiopia to stay there.
This isn't just about Aliyah. This is about saving lives.
Let me come home. Home is wherever I'm with you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for a discussion of the passengers. I'm Sherry Goldberg, Chair of the CRC, the Community Relations Committee of Jewish Federation. I know that everyone here loves Israel, and our hearts and souls are in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Israel right now. It's painful to watch the escalation. I know we all stand with Israel. Before we even begin our program today, I would like to observe a moment of silence for those who have lost their lives in the conflict, as well as the Ethiopian Jews who lost their lives on their journey to make Aliyah. Thank you. I'd now like to welcome our distinguished panelists. Ryan Porish is a documentary filmmaker and video journalist based in Los Angeles and New York City. He's produced films and edited documentaries and short films around the world with an emphasis on telling dynamic, character-driven stories that give voice to marginalized communities. The Passengers is Ryan's first feature film. His next documentary, titled As School Grows in Watts, is currently in post-production. Micha Feldman has worked for the Jewish Agency and other organizations on immigration and absorption for the last 38 years. Micha speaks Amharic fluently and was responsible for Operation Solomon, where 14,000 Beta Israel were flown from Addis Ababa to Tel Aviv. Abba Micha has led multiple Greater Metro West delegations to Ethiopia, including one that I was on in 2018. He currently serves as the director of the Ethiopian department within Sela and Israel Crisis Management Center, an organization that helps Israeli immigrants in crisis from Ethiopia, among other places. Gezai Werki needs no introduction, as he's one of the featured Ethiopian activists in our film. We will be having a panel discussion for the first part of our program, and then we'll open up to the audience for questions. If you have a question, please type it into the chat, and I'll ask the questions as we see them at the end of our panel discussion. So first of all, Gezai, welcome. At the end of the film, Damaz and his family found out that they were included on the list of 1,300 Ethiopians to make Aliyah in 2017. While you were still waiting in Gondar to hear your fate, could you please update us on what has happened to you since then?
Thank you. Shalom to everyone. My name is Gezai Werki. As you know, my friend Damaz made Aliyah in 2017. At that time, I was grade 11, and I finished grade 11. There was a vacation for a long time. A day after Damaz left Gondar, I flew to USA. I flew to Los Angeles in order to volunteer in Jewish camp. And then I go back to Ethiopia after about 3 months, and then study, learn grade 12. At the end of grade 12, I took national exam in order to join university. I was accepted for a degree in engineering in Tigray. There was a conflict. Of course, Micha know about that. And for me, it was difficult to stay there. I don't like the location. That was dangerous. And I stopped to study engineering. Thanks to David, Shira, of course, Ryan, they sent me money, and I start study in Addis, in private college, nursing first degree in nursing. And at the middle of my study in 2019, Israeli embassy gave us permission to make Aliyah, and then I made Aliyah in 2019. Now I'm here. I'm studying nursing in University of Haifa. Thanks to God, I'm here.
It's so heartwarming to hear that you were finally given permission. Why do you think it took so many years until you and your family were allowed to come to Israel?
I don't really know exactly what was the reason, but it happens for many Ethiopian Jews many times. I mean, my aunt and uncle still waiting there. No one knows what the reason, but sometimes they give us some reasons, because we are not Jewish enough. I'm Jewish only by one side. Such kind of reasons, but that's not enough for us. I think as a community, we have to be here. We belong to be here in Israel.
You said you have family that you had to still leave behind in Israel, and they don't know their fate yet, when they'll be able to come?
Yes, I have 3 uncle and 1 aunt. One live in Addis, and the rest of them live in Gondar. Yeah, they can still there waiting there. I don't know why Israel government didn't allow them to make Aliyah.
When you're given permission, how long does it take from the time you're told to the time that you make Aliyah?
For the last, I think, 5 years, the process takes a short time, but before that, it took many time. For example, my uncle, he got permission a year ago, I think, a year before he made Aliyah. But for the last 5 years, if someone got permission, it takes about 2 months or 3 months. I was in the middle of the study and they just called me and I made Aliyah after 2 months, I think. That was short.
So the last 10 days have been difficult for everybody in Israel, actually for all Jews around the world watching what's happening. But before the war with Gaza started, how would you describe your Aliyah experience?
Yeah, 2020 also was a difficult year for all of us because of coronavirus. Before that, I mean, 2019 was a very nice year. And also 2020 was fine compared to what's happening right now. I think Israel a very good, successful country, many smart people, many good people around. I like to be here. I really proud of them, how, as a nation, how we get here and how they become successful. It's a small country, but with a big dream and a big potential. I like people here.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to Micha now. Micha, in less than a week, will be marking the 30-year anniversary of Operation Solomon. You've been involved with Ethiopian immigration for 4 decades almost. Could you describe the situation concerning Aliyah after you and the people involved in that operation brought more than 14,000 Ethiopian Jews to Israel in just 36 hours?
Okay. At the end of the operation, about 3,000 people who claimed to have the right to come to Israel were left behind because they didn't qualify. You can be sure in the meantime they arrived in Israel. They are not there anymore. And then by the end of Operation Solomon, I want to give you the exact number. Over 40,000 Ethiopian Jews made it to Israel by the end of Operation Solomon. Today, we are counting over 95,000 Olim from Ethiopia. So what happened? Besides 5,000 people who qualified later for the law of return, all the others were descendants of Jews whose ancestors converted to Christianity. Now, the law of return says if you were forced to convert, then you may come to Israel in spite of having taken another faith. But in the 2 committees that I was part of as an advisor, not as a decision maker, it was clearly proven that they were not, besides a few, were not forced. They wanted to improve their life, which is okay with me. But the moment you don't have at least, and you mentioned it in the movie, one Jewish grandparent of the poor, if you don't have that, you don't qualify for the law of return. But in spite of that, the government of Israel decided that since 1994 until today, what we call seeds of Israel, of the Jewish people, may come on humanitarian grounds on family reunification grounds to Israel, and I told you the number. More of the people who are descendants of converts have made Aliyah to Israel than Beta Israel Jews who kept their Judaism. But it has taken a long time, and still there are people there.
So can you explain again the difference of the law of return and the family reunification law to just make it clear as to
Okay.
the separate law that was enacted just
As
for
I said, the law of return says every Jew, a spouse of a Jew, every child of a Jew, a spouse of a child of a Jew, a grandchild of a Jew, and a spouse of a grandchild of a Jew may come to Israel under the law of return and become right away Israeli citizens. If you don't qualify, then you are not allowed from all over the world. So we decided, or our government decided, in spite of the law of return, to go beyond the law of return because of the family connection of the, you could say, the clan. In Ethiopian social structure, if I'll ask you, who is your cousin third grade? You will say, I don't know. I don't know cousins of third grade of mine. But in the family structure in Ethiopia, you are connected and obliged to support even family members who are 7 generations away from you. You are, by the way, not allowed to marry them, but you have responsibility towards them. So because of that, our government decided to allow family reunification, and all those people who have come since 1994 come under, most of them didn't come under the law of return, but under the law of entrance, then reconverted to Judaism, and are now full citizens of Israel. And Gezhein, after he will finish his studies at Haifa University, will be drafted into the Israeli army as a full member of the state of Israel.
And the 2015 agreement, could you explain what that one was?
This is part of the whole process. In 2015, there was a decision that all those who are waiting and qualify for family reunification, meaning if they have first-grade relatives in Israel, then at least one member of the family, then the whole family will be allowed to come to Israel. But instead of making it fast, we are doing it on a very small pace, which is, in my eyes, I could even say stupid. Because at the end of the day, all of them will come, those who qualify. I admit that checking it is not so easy. They question the people, relatives in Israel, then they cross-check in Ethiopia, then all the people from the Ministry of Interior, then they go back and recheck until they are sure that no one is cheating, okay? But most of them are not cheating. And at the end of the day, all of them will come. So I would have done it on a much faster pace than it's done today.
Thank you. Ryan, how did you come to make this most amazing film? How did this topic come into your interest?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for supporting the film and hosting this event. And I want to acknowledge Demos, who is not with us, who is in Israel, and just kind of thank him, as well as Gezhein, and as well as David Elkop, for allowing, you know, this story to be told, for being so vulnerable and open. I first heard of this story and issue through David in 2015. I was in New York and we were doing some work together unrelated to this issue. And about this time, he came back from Ethiopia where he was on a trip with his wife, Rabbi Shira Milgram. And this is a story he tells at the beginning of the film. Is they went to witness what was billed as the final aliyah of the Ethiopian Jews, and he is sitting in the synagogue in Gondar and turns to the young man next to him, who is Demos, and asks him, "When are you going to Israel?" Thinking that everyone was leaving. Israel was closing the synagogue that they had been sponsoring for years, taking the Torah home back to Israel. And it turned out that that wasn't the case, that there were going to be about 9,000 left behind. And so David comes back to New York and tells me he was really torn up about it, which is how he gets. He really cares deeply about causes and is a big activist, and this became his new issue to fight for. And he knew that he wanted to bring young men, members from this community, to the US to tell their story, with the assumption that progressive American Jews would not turn the other way, and also that they still had a role to play in pressuring Israel or having the ear of Israeli leadership. Myself, I had been to Israel a couple times at this point, and was under the impression that any Jew in the world that wanted to be in Israel was essentially in Israel. And so that idea of this longing, of this journey, I think is reflected in the title of this identity in a way. David refers to it, in the documentary. He says, too Jewish for Ethiopia, but not Jewish enough for Israel, or too Black for Israel. But just that idea of exploring identity and was so inherently interesting. And so that began our conversation about me profiling the campaign that he was starting. And I knew I needed to go to Ethiopia to establish our characters and the community there before following them to the US. And that was quite a journey, and like a special time capturing what you see in the film, but also for me personally, like showing up in Addis Ababa and learning about Ethiopian time and meeting Gazan for the first time and sleeping off the jet lag and him showing me around and exploring with the camera. It's really, the overwhelmingly Zionist community that you see in the beginning of the film is just that. It's by far, I would say, the most Zionist community that I've come across. And I've filmed in Israel and the Old City and all over. Just the idea that in the face of, you could say, being rejected over many years by Israel, the devout faith and belief that tomorrow still could be the day that they go there. And they don't Gazan and the people in the community that I met don't want to go anywhere else. Several of them, including Gazan and Demos, had chances to immigrate to the US or to get a visa to go to college, and it was never an option.
Yeah, the film absolutely took us back. A number of us who were on the trip together in 2018 are on now, and we each, when watching the movie, it took us right back. You really filmed exactly what our experience was walking into Gondar and seeing these people. We too had pretty similar experience to what you're describing, David Elcott. We signed up to go the end of 2017, the beginning of 2018, and we thought at the time we were taking the last group of Ethiopian Jews back to Israel. And that 2017 agreement, they chose the 1,300 people, and they actually left Ethiopia right before we got there. So we land into Gondar, seeing the Jewish agency closing up shop. And at that point, it seemed like no hope left. We were told at the time there were 8,000 Ethiopian Jews remaining. That number seems to continue to be, no matter how many make it Aliyah, we hear the number 8,000. Do you have an idea of how many there are Ethiopian Jews still in Ethiopia waiting to make Aliyah now?
I'm not exactly positive. I think Micha might have a better idea, but my understanding is that it is kind of in that 8,000 range. I mean, there was a 9,000 count, and then if we kind of subtract 1,300, and then 2,000 have come in the last 8 months or year or so. And then, I mean, people and Jews have babies and families grow. And I think I'm not sure. My understanding is that most, maybe not all, but most of the Jews that historically, as you have learned, came from the countryside, that may still be happening. But for the most part, I think that it's because families are growing that are already in the city, if that number is creeping back up, I guess.
And was also, when we came to the absorption centers in Israel and met some of the new Olim, we realized that one could be married and then that the spouse is now in Israel, which opens up a whole nother family that now has a first degree relative. So it seems as if the number is, the hope to reunify, I think will happen, but the numbers keep changing because, like you said, babies are born, families get extended through marriage, and then a whole nother line of people now have a first degree relative in Israel. So,
yeah, it's difficult for sure. And part of what is difficult on like a human level, and for us as Jews, is to try to reconcile how families, first degree relatives, could be split up. There's a way to understand it, of course, like logistically and the way that governments work and immigration works. But with this movie, I think it is definitely about such a complicated, broad issue, but really, I think it's the story of these two young men and their relationship and their journey, and their meeting a father figure and growing as Jews and as people. Gazain, I know for many years before he was able to make Aliyah, did not see his sister, right? Gazain, first degree relative sister who had made Aliyah with her husband and children many years earlier. So Gazain's mom had not seen her granddaughter for several years. Israel, I think, she couldn't even go on a trip, like not even to make Aliyah. So that was, I know, for their family difficult, no doubt.
So do you have any idea why Gazain and Damaz didn't find more support from progressive American Jews who are quick to support racial justice efforts in the US?
It's a good question. I guess it comes down somewhat to defining support. I think that most of the people they spoke to were supportive, empathetic or sympathetic, or definitely wanted to help and would have said, you belong in Israel. Most of them did say that. But I think not knowing how to take action, a lot of these organizations say that they are apolitical, which is difficult when we're talking about Israel. I mean, I think anything and everything could be political, as we're reminded of right now. And I think I sensed a lot of frustration that American Jews, progressives, and maybe wherever on the spectrum are not feeling heard by Israel, or don't have enough agency, or are really having to pick their battles. And that was disappointing. I mean, you see David, especially, he kind of built the campaign on an assumption that turned out to be partially false, I think is safe to say. And it's indicative, unfortunately, we've brought up the operations, Operation Moses and Operation Solomon, where the Israeli government went to such extreme lengths to bring Jews home with the help of American leadership. And things have shifted for a multitude of reasons so far. And it would be so much easier to bring this final small group, as has been the case. And things have changed, and we can't get it done, you know? And I think your question kind of feeds into that a little bit, like the role or lack thereof, or agency or lack thereof of progressive American Jewish leadership with regard to Israel.
Yeah, that's really what I found so surprising in the movie, was that the Jewish Federation's declining to get involved, because I'm proud to let our audience know that we at Greater Metro West Federation have had a different experience. We've been supporting Ethiopian Jewry for many, many years. Greater Metro West has led many missions to Ethiopia, going back to Operation Promise, which was launched by the Jewish Federations of North America in 2005. We have lay leaders on the boards of the Jewish Agency for Israel and for the Joint Distribution Committee, and have been to Ethiopia multiple times. And in recent years, our allocations committee has made a number of dedicated donations to support Ethiopians waiting to make Aliyah. Our communities also supported Ethiopian Israeli communities in our sister city in Rishon LeZion and the Ramat Eliyahu Center. We've got an integrated preschool and an Etgarim program for risked Ethiopian Israeli teenagers in Ramat Eliyahu's section of Rishon LeZion. Just after the film left off at the 2018 Jewish Federation General Assembly in Jerusalem, the Pittsburgh Federation made a special presentation to the Knesset to encourage enforcement of the 2015 agreement. And then right after that, our federation also passed a resolution to enforce the 2015 agreement, which was to bring every eligible Ethiopian Jew back with so I'm proud that our community has been on top of this, although sad, because even as much activism as you show, David Elka put his whole heart and soul. Gezai and Damaz were excellent spokesmen. And this movie now getting around, I think is like, this is a good reminder to everybody exactly what the situation on the ground is. I want to go back to Micha, and I want you to ask, to tell us a little bit about Sela and how we can support your work there, Micha.
Okay, in short, first of all, thank you for being so supportive. As you mentioned, you personally and the Metro West Federation as a whole. We at Sela support families of Olim from all over the world who have been hit by tragedy. And the rationale behind it is that any Ole coming to Israel goes through a crisis. Any immigration, even in the States, moving from one city to another, knowing the language, knowing the rules, you go through hardship. But if you are an Ole and you come from one country not knowing the language, not knowing the laws, and not having your friends and family around you, you have a hard time to go through. But if you are hit by a tragedy on top of the immigration crisis that you go through, then you are completely lost. So therefore we get involved, and our aim is to help the family to get back on track. The moment we believe together with the family that now they are set and they can, with our help, go further into their future, we leave them. And I think I enjoy very much my work within Sela. I enjoy it in spite of the fact that I go to a shiva, I visit people in hospitals, and when I come back home and my wife asks me, how was your day? I always answer, I'm very happy. How can you be happy, she asks me, going to a shiva or going to a hospital? And my answer is that if I look at those people's eyes and I see how important our involvement is I can be happy of what I've done that day.
Thank you, Micha. We are going to now go to questions in the chat. If anybody's got specific questions, please put them into the chat and I'll relay them. Micha, one of the things that was asked is about the conversions. The reason for the conversions was probably pretty similar to what we find throughout former Soviet Union and other places where there's discrimination and people had difficult lives. Could you talk a little bit about how non-Jews look at Jews in Ethiopia?
Look at?
So, for instance, I remember you telling us about some of the things that the occupations that they work with, the potters, with fire and blacksmiths. And so there's a feeling in Ethiopia about the non-Jews that these Jews have some kind of.
Yes, okay.
Why don't you tell this story better
in
than
Ethiopia, me. Jews are called Buddha by their neighbors. It's against the law, by the way, which means that they are not cannibals, but the term that they use, they eat the person, meaning they have evil eye. So if they are angry with someone, they can look at this person and this person will fall sick. This is what people in northern Ethiopia believe about Jews. So, and they were called all kinds of other names, and they also lost the right to own land. So they were forced to rent land and pay the landlord until the communists came into power. But until then, to pay the landlord up to half of the harvest. So they were forced to be the poorest of the poorest, and therefore they took upon themselves professions that others didn't want to take, like blacksmithing. Blacksmiths and ceramics. The men were blacksmiths and the women did ceramics. In both professions, you use fire, right? Mm-hmm. And in Africa, not only in Ethiopia, people who use fire for their profession many times are believed to have evil eye. And this is what the Jews had to suffer all the generations.
So it's not so surprising that certain families generations back tried to make a better life for themselves by converting. And then when we look at Jews that we see in former Soviet Union who find out 2 generations later that their grandparents were Jews, because they didn't know, the grandparents were hiding from them their Jewish roots because they were afraid for their families. So it seems like it's a similar story throughout Jewish history.
But this all falls into the law of return. So
Right.
if my grandfather was Jewish, although I assimilated, still I have the right to go to Israel. While here we are talking more generations ago, and therefore many didn't qualify. I mentioned it before.
Yeah. We got a question about the economics. One of the things that Avraham Nagasi said was that it's being told that there's no budget in Israel for this, and but that's not the truth. When we met with Avraham Nagasi, who is the member of Knesset that was in the movie, we were in the community mission in 2018. And he told us privately that he did not think budget was the reason that of the slow movement. What do you have any other information on that? Any of you?
Okay. I'm not sitting in the government, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. I think this was not the reason. There were political reasons. I don't want to go further and say even racist attitude, because Israel has proven, as Ryan mentioned before, during the 80s and early 90s, we did very dangerous operations both in Sudan and in Ethiopia in order to bring the Jews to Israel, and no other country in the world did it. Bringing black people instead of to slavery as it was done in the Americas, and to bring them to Israel to live in freedom. So there are political reasons, and again, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be checked. If people are not eligible according to the law of return, they shouldn't come to Israel, be it from Russia, from Peru, or from Ethiopia. Here, with Ethiopia, the moment we already decided that people who are the seed of Israel and have first-grade relatives in Israel should be allowed to come, we should have done it. And we should now do it on a faster pace, because at the end of the day, all of them will come instead of letting them suffer.
Absolutely. You mentioned about politics. I personally find it interesting that going back, Menachem Begin was even before Operation Moses, when it was just the Mossad who was going to Sudan and taking boatload by boatload of Ethiopians who passed through the Semien Mountains and ended up in refugee camps. It seemed like it was a very, going through the different years, Likud was credited for taking a great interest, and Avraham Nagisi also was in the Likud party. In recent years, when Bougie Herzog, who we know was former Labor, became the head of the Jewish Agency, and then Penina Tamana Shata from Blue and White became Minister of Aliyah, we saw a flood of 2,000 new Ethiopian Olim in the last 8 months during coronavirus. Is there any shift in politics of Ethiopians? I'll leave it for whoever wants to take this question, whether that's made a difference.
Again,
So,
Brian, you want to answer?
I'll go off you, but I think it has. Yeah.
It was interesting to me because it always seemed like it was a big Likud initiative to bring over the Ethiopians, and now it's sort of harder with the government to find the money, to find the resources. But I'll tell you,
it's sorry to cut you off. It's so hard to really know. I think kind of what Micha was saying. So I think member of Knesset Avraham Negusi is a politician and was saying not that he doesn't believe it or that it's not true, but he's speaking for a purpose, for effect, to represent a community. So when he says they have the money for blondes with blue eyes, but not black people, he has a purpose, to say that as a politician. But I think the campaign that David started was also operating under the assumption that budgetary reasons was not the true reason, right?
Mhm.
And so beyond that, it's so hard to speculate, on what would have gotten it done, what will get it done as far as the party in power or the leadership in power. I think the most encouraging sign, mentioned it earlier, 2,000 Beta Israel have immigrated to Israel from Ethiopia in a major way because, and I don't want to get her name wrong, but I believe the minister of Aliyah now is Ethiopian Jewish woman, Penina, and I'm forgetting her last name, but I know Yeah, there we go. Micha, I know that has made a big difference and is a real reason for optimism to finish the job, hopefully.
We have to remember that Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir are not only have not only been Zionists, they are very humanitarian personalities, and they put away many issues of politics when it comes to bringing Jews or helping people, while our new leadership is not the same.
Yeah, although I personally have been very impressed with Penina Tamana-Shata and what she's been able to accomplish in the last year as Minister of Aliyah. We, in our trip, met a number of Ethiopian Israelis who came back to show us where they lived and what their life was like before. And I was wondering if you could go through some of the Ethiopian success stories in Israel, because we all know there is racism and there is hardship and there are challenges, but there are also a lot of successes.
Like Demas, who went with us to Ethiopia, he just a few weeks ago became a captain. Now we had 3, and he's continuing with his army career. This is a success story.
Yes. How was it for you, Gezai, when you made Aliyah? Did you go to an absorption center initially? What were the challenges of coming to a new country?
Yes, I still live in an absorption center. My family lives in an absorption center, north part of Israel. I live in a student dorm in Haifa. Yeah, there was difficult to live far from my sister and my niece. They live in Beersheba. We live in the north part, but it is good to be here. That's the main thing. We can get just 5 or 6, 4-hour drive, and then we can see them. It's better to be here instead of staying in Ethiopia. I see also many Ethiopian students here in the university, and I'm really proud of them. I mean, there is many Ethiopian here. They try to change their life and become successful.
It's
Maybe you allow me to mention that we have two affirmative actions that we have taken. Everyone who is of Ethiopian origin, even if born in Israel, can study without paying any tuition up to their master's degree if they go to a university or to a college that is a public college, not a private one. Private one costs a lot of money. The second affirmative action, knowing that if we compare, for example, the Russian Aliyah with the Ethiopian Aliyah, the people who make Aliyah from the former Soviet Union can take a mortgage backed by the government from the bank, so they can buy their own apartment. Ethiopian Olim get almost full payment. They get like a grant that allows them to buy their own apartment, and so they can choose where they want to live. Of course, it's not unlimited, the grant. It's limited, but at least they can decide where they want to live. They live mostly in low-income neighborhoods, I admit, but at least they get those two special affirmative actions: studies for the younger generation and housing for the older generation. And this costs, by the way, a lot of money.
Can I add something? I just want to say something about the finance if someone want to learn in Israel, like me. I mean, thanks to David, Ryan, and other American Jewish, I got a sponsorship from them. Someone who want to learn like me, who made Aliyah recently, he just can't, because the Israel government covers only the payment of the fee of the university, not cover the dorms, not cover other expenses. So what I want to say is, not everyone can join university, and I don't think Israel government covers everything. Even in buying a house, my family got only half of the payment. And it is difficult, but still it is good. It's better than nothing. I mean, it doesn't mean they cover everything. I just want to mention that. Thank you.
and
But part of what Gazain is referring to is that since the film was completed, so Gazain made Aliyahs in Israel, and David visited him in his dorm, which was pretty empty. He didn't have a pillow and sheets and some school supplies and stuff. And so Israel is paying for tuition, and I think a bit more, but not everything. And so through the film, we've actually started a fund at NACOJ, which is North American Conference on Ethiopian Jewry. We started a fund called Aliyah to College, where people who want to support this issue, support the Ethiopian Jewish community, can donate, and money will go towards young, recent Ethiopian immigrants in Israel, the cost of going to school, the extra stuff. And so Gazain was the first recipient, you could say, of some of the donations, and he's doing his thing up in Haifa. And there's more coming. So that's one, not that we or the film is afraid of, I guess, getting political, but this is a really nice way to support the community and its success in Israel, which is something we've been talking about as well. And you can get more information about this on our film's website, which is thepassengersdocumentary.com.
thank you, Ryan. And speaking of success stories, I understand Eden Aline is in his.
Eden Alene.
I'm sorry?
Eden Alene.
Beautiful name and beautiful voice, as she is now one of Israel's Eurovision contest finalists. It's always
Yes.
exciting to see.
Yesterday, she passed to become part of the finals, which will take place on Shabbat night, Motzai Shabbat, Saturday night, and hopefully she will win. We hope so. Although outside there were protesters, pro-Palestinian, who gave out pamphlets, don't vote for Israel that is demolishing Gaza. Nevertheless, she got into the finals because of her voice and the whole personnel.
It's very exciting. We'll be rooting for her. So, Micha, you mentioned about our friend Damas Fakadi's success. Can you share a little bit of the story of how he came to fame? Damas came with us to show us back to his family roots, and it's a very you got to know him through Sela because of the
Yes.
misfortune his family suffered.
So the family went to an absorption center, maybe the same absorption center where you live in Beit Alta, isn't it? Design? He lived in the same absorption center in the north with his mother. The father was already passed already away, and the mother with 5 boys was in this absorption center, and with the help of the government, she bought an apartment in Cologne. Unfortunately, a week after they moved into the house, she passed away. And 5 boys were now on their own, and we were with them during Shiva and afterwards. And as I said, today we can say they have done it. They are back on track. And we invited Damas to come with us and show us where he was waiting for Aliyah in Gondar. As a matter of fact, when he arrived there, the house was gone, but at least he could stand on the spot where this rented home was situated. And his older brother has now his bachelor degree, and I'm invited next week for the with the black hat, whatever they get at the university when they finish their studies. So this family, you can say, in spite of the fact that they grew up as orphans without parents, they made it. And we helped a bit. Most of the power came from inside them. They are strong people, and they overcame the grief. And but still, we have contact, and I enjoy very much that I am part of what they do.
Yeah. But could you just tell quickly, we don't have a lot of time left, but the story about when he came home for Shabbat and had a bicycle on apparently the wrong side of the road, and what happened to him, how that
the Mas is famous in Israel, not only among Ethiopian Olim. He was in uniform, coming back from the army on a bicycle. He was stopped by a policeman that told him that he is not allowed to pass, and he was very close to his home. And he asked the policeman why. And the policeman said to him, if I tell you not to pass, you don't pass. So the Mas said to him, I have eyes to see, I have ears to hear, so explain to me. And this policeman got angry with him and pushed him and called another policeman, and they hit him, and they almost took him to the police station for questioning, and maybe even at the end of the day to imprison him. Thanks God, there was a security camera that took everything on video, and it was checked right away. And this policeman that started the whole issue a long time is not a policeman anymore. And Damas is succeeding.
Yeah, but it shows that these events that can turn your life in a minute. He could have ended up without that security camera, rotting away in jail, and
I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, because it shows you a moment in history how things could change his whole trajectory. But he was able to overcome the challenges because that security camera showed this. And then I think that there were Ethiopian Israelis who then started protesting for rights for Ethiopian
Big
Israelis.
protests. Yes.
Yeah.
He initiated it.
One more question that came in is, what can we as American Jewish Federation do to help promote faster Aliyah? We know the Israeli government certainly has their hands full with lots of different priorities right now, but is there something that we can do as a federation to continue to help this cause?
Ryan, you want to answer?
From my perspective, support the film. We're trying to get the movie out to audiences much like this, where we can have these sort of important conversations and advance the issue. You can find more information on the website on how to make that happen. There's the petition up there, the original kind of petition that was part of the campaign that David started. Yeah, that's from my perspective, that's how we're kind of supporting this issue and trying to help achieve the ultimate goal, which is to complete the Aliyah.
Yeah, and I have hope it will happen. I hope it'll happen faster than it has been, but I do feel that things are moving in the right direction. Gezai, could you tell us, what are your hopes for your future in Israel? What do you see in your future?
I think the future will be brighter. And I hope all my community be here, must be proud, and they join us, will be as one, as a Jewish. That's my future. That's what I predict.
Thank you. That's wonderful. So I see.
Can I add one sentence?
Mm-hmm.
Can I add one sentence?
Please.
I hope that as part of this path that we are hoping to take, Israeli society will understand that the Ethiopian Olim are not a burden, but an asset to Israel. If this will be clear to every Israeli, their absorption and our society as a whole will be much better.
There's no question. Thank you.
Beautifully said, Micha. Thank you.
So, Gezai, we wish you and your family all the best in Israel in the years ahead. And of course, to you and Micha, we pray for your safety and a return to calm soon. Ryan, thank you for bringing this beautiful story of Ethiopians still awaiting Aliyah to life in your beautiful film. We have in the chat the website, and I hope that everybody on this Zoom today takes just one friend and shares this story so that everybody continues to learn meaningful story that you brought forward to us. We encourage everyone to learn more about the situation of the Jews still awaiting Aliyah by getting involved with CRC or Global Connections. And to all who have joined us today, thank you. Be well, and And let us all continue praying for peace in our beloved state of Israel. Thank you
And
all.
we should have more Sherry Goldbergs. We should have more Sherry Goldbergs.
We have